A Dale Carnegie survey that you will all find in your kits says trust in senior leadership is one of the 3 critical ingredients of employee engagement. When an employee believes in and trusts senior leadership, they are much more likely to be engaged than those who don't. And to discuss this very fascinating topic, trust-based relationships, a business imperative, this evening we bring to you an eclectic panel.
With an experience of 33 years in the financial services industry as part of the Tata Group, our first panelist is currently Head Business Development and Chief Ethics Counselor with Tata Capital Limited. She is part of the founding team of Tata Capital, having joined in 2007 and was Head of Wealth Management. In February 2015, she received the Women Leadership Achievement Award from the World Women Leadership Congress and Awards. Please put your hands together for our first panelist, Kashmira Mewawala.
The equity partner and group CEO of Madison Media and OOH, India's largest independent media agency. Our second panelist, in his 30-year career, has been the global CEO of Maxis, the CEO of Group M South Asia, and Mindshare South Asia. He started his career with P&G and Coca-Cola in media, market research, and brand marketing. He also set up the marketing department at Star India, which is a part of News Corp. He has been on the board of several industries, including ASCI, ABC, RSCI, BARC, and FICCI. He has consistently been voted among the most influential persons in the Indian media by the Economic Times. Let's give it up for Vikram Sakhuja.
What can I say about the third panelist? He is Vice President of Training for Dale Carnegie and Associates, where his responsibilities include developing and coordinating trainer development and certification systems that allow trainers not only to meet but exceed our client expectations. By using Dale Carnegie's timeless methodology, URCEL is able to impact trainers delivering Dale Carnegie programs in over 90 countries, which are delivered in 40 different languages. Previous to joining Dale Carnegie, URCEL worked with Capgemini America as manager of professional staff, where he directed consulting activities for his staff of over 45 consultants, serving in developing information systems and programs for top Fortune 500 companies. With a huge round of applause, let us all welcome URCEL Charles.
She has singularly led the India operations into one of the fastest growing territories for Dale Carnegie. Besides, she has been a vocal spokesperson for Industry Association and an active member of CII, having held various offices, from the chairperson for CII Maharashtra Council and member of the National Skills Development Committee to chairing the Indian Women's Network Western Region, a CII initiative aimed at engaging and empowering women, which she helped set up. She is also a qualified executive coach and is recognized as a leading expert on employee engagement. This is none other than Pallavi Jha.
And to introduce our moderator for the panel discussion, Executive Director of Dale Carnegie Training India, a born multitasker who is also an author, executive coach, and mentor. Prior to starting Dale Carnegie, he was instrumental in setting up the private sector mutual fund industry in India and founding one of the world's leading internet portals, cricketnext.com. His work comprises of experience in ANZ Greenlands Bank, Bank of America, Alliance Capital in New York, and Threadneedle in UK. Sanjay, you would also know, is a national spokesman of the Indian National Congress, but he has also published a cricket anthology, a collection of poems, and most recently co-authored a book on leadership titled The Superstar Syndrome. Ladies and gentlemen, Sanjay Jha for you. Over to you, Sanjay.
Thank you very much. First thing, can you guys hear me at the back, everyone? Yeah, I think let's all of us say something so we check our audio.
Hi, check, check.
Hello? Everyone can hear me? All right, great.
I don't think you need a mic.
I hope you can hear me too. Uh-oh. Any better?
Not really, not really.
So what do I do?
Can you just check the sound here, please?
Testing. I think everybody.
Yeah, Vikram, you're through. Okay, while your mic's being checked, let's get the audience in. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for being here. The topic for the evening is trust. So I'm going to ask you to get into this conversation rather early. What do you think are the most trusted vocations or occupations in India or frankly in different parts of the world? What do you think are the most trusted jobs? Doctors. Come on, let's hear some more answers. Okay, I think the one who gets it right is going to get a signed book of your choice outside. So somebody said doctors, you're very close. Teachers. Okay. I mean, politicians are not even in the list.
How about mothers?
I thought of that.
Well, mothers, that's what you said, huh? Oh, okay, let me tell you. Yeah. Babysitters, that's a good one, okay? You're very close, actually. Professionals.
Army, somebody.
I've got some bad news for you. Business executives, I've got some bad news for you. Okay, I'll tell you what. I mean, this is how the list goes. But the first, one of you said doctors, and I said it's close to it. Now, come on, make a guess. Got it. That's it. Nurses are actually number one in terms of being the most trusted. I mean, if you have seen the Omen, that might, of course, not sink in there. But nurses truly are the most trusted overall, not just in India, but even in the US. And I was looking at the list very closely. At number 2 are doctors, you got it right. Armed forces at number 3. Wow. And number 4, scientists. I think all of us panelists are getting depressed now. Judges at number 5. And I guess we know why. Number 6, medical officers. So those are people who basically are in the pharma industry. Then you have fire officers, and I think Mumbai has enough experience of that. Then teachers. Then the IAS, which I think should be encouraging to the bureaucracy. Then you have social workers. Then, not surprisingly, lawyers. By the way, corporate executives, you're not doing too well, huh? Just about neck to neck with the lawyers. And everybody knows that the best place for them is the bottom of the ocean. And the politicians don't even qualify. They're not even in the list. They're not even in the running. Let's start the whole conversation. Is the panel ready? Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a fantastic panel. Give them a warm hand. Unlike most of the conversations you find, we are not going to be rude. We are not going to be impertinent. This is going to be very pleasant, which means that only I will interrupt them. And in case they outshout me back, I will tell somebody to just kind of reduce their microphones. These are the rules of the game. Please make sure your mobile phones are on silent. Don't switch it off because the calls that come during that time are usually very critical. Ursula, let me start with you.
Okay.
There is an old saying that in God we trust, everyone else is a suspect. And therefore, my question to you is, are we very cynical about trusting? I mean, it's a very foundational term for everything. But are, as human beings, we very cynical that, distrust is a very lovely thing to talk about, but virtually impossible to practice?
Yeah, I would agree that we have found that it is cynical because I think people take trust for granted. I think trust is like what Dale Carnegie says about many of his principles. It's common sense, but it's not common practice.
Right.
It all makes sense that we should have trust. In fact, I ask myself all the time, do we have any significant relationship in any of our lives that are not predicated on trust?
Yeah.
So trust is foundational to any important relationship, but many of us feel that it just comes by default. Maybe it's already there. And I think I have perspectives on that. And I think that we have to be purposeful about trust.
Right.
Trust is not something we get because of all of our credibility. In fact, I have an equation that said trust equals personal credibility plus empathy. Credibility is what we do, and empathy is how we engage. And both are important. Without empathy, you get compliance. And without credibility, you get tolerance. So trust is really significant to anything, and it's something we have to do to get the results we want from our
Yep, and we got a very interesting findings which I'll bring up during the course of the conversation. Kashmir, let me come to you. Sure. You represent the financial services industry. And I remember I used to work with a bank before, and one of the ad lines that was very popular was "Bank on us." So the whole theme was trust, reliability. Bank on us. Today, India is experiencing ILFS. It's become a four-letter bad word. Yeah, and we've seen that a very high-profile CEO recently had to quit on account of very serious acquisitions. Think about it, and you and I also know that in 2008 there was a financial bloodbath in the US that made the world go into a deep recession. Again, the financial services industry you are part of. How do you expect customers, and I'm sure you battle with it, therefore I want to ask you that, how do you expect customers to basically believe in banks or mutual funds or broking houses or any of these institutions when they suspect that at the very top there could be things that are not really the way they ought to be?
So thank you, Sanjay, and thank you, Pallavi, for organizing this. Pleasure to be here with all my other panelists. And so whatever answers I give are not really relevant, are not really specific to the names which you mentioned.
Right.
These are just generally from my book.
Right.
And you're very correct in terms of where the financial services industry or the banking industry really lies as far as the trust barometer is concerned, and I think it's pretty low. And that's not peculiar to India, that's all over the world.
True.
In fact, any of the major crises that have hit the world have always been something to do with the financial services.
Right.
And that has been the start of throwing the world into some sort of depression, even as late as the great financial crisis that we all experienced in 2008. Now coming to how do general customers, and I'm saying that obviously because in a bank or a financial services, you're dealing with a lot of retail, dealing with a lot of people whose very hard-earned money has to be invested. So how do you get retail people to begin to trust? And I think the trust really starts from the brand. And therefore when I look at my own self to say how hard or how easy it is to sell a product in the financial services space today, and I think it's a little easier for us because of our brand that we represent. And I'm not selling, but the question alludes itself to that. Yeah. We've seen 150 years of trust. So when you look at, how do people build relationships or how do people build trust, it's over a great period of time. And experience upon, every interaction, every transaction, every communication, gives you that scope to either build that trust or harm it. So, for those of us who represent brands, and I'm sure there are many in the room who represent excellent brands, we become very responsible because every commitment you made, you have to ensure that you're doing something to this brand where somebody else is going to take a buying decision or a selling decision based on your action. So I think it is an uphill task because people have to believe and trust you when they're putting in their hard-earned money.
Right.
And that comes, one, from the brand and the legacy which you enjoy, but there are a number of new brands in the market And people do begin to trust and rely on that, and that comes with experience.
Sure.
So one experience, word of mouth, because every experience tells a story.
Yeah.
And that's how a culture or a brand gets built.
And you'll agree it's tougher, and I'm sure, ladies and gentlemen, please keep your questions ready. We'll come to you down the line. But the fragility of the brand. I mean, I remember I was on an Indigo flight from Delhi to Mumbai, and it got late, and there was one unhappy guy, and he said, I'm going to tweet about it, and I'm going to rubbish it on Facebook the way he was handled. So, and you see that happening to airlines in particular, that somebody has a bad day, they just completely kind of trash you. So your reputation or your trust factor is 24/7 hard work. Pallavi, I'll come to you next. The survey that Dale Carnegie has done says that 71% of the customers, they buy a product or a service looking at the salesperson they encounter. And, end of day, whatever be the product, whatever be the brand that you're talking about, et cetera, the person in front seems to be the trigger point for the buying decision. Yet, we find that everyone is focused on the selling of the product and the features and the benefit story without even thinking whether you have the credibility to make that sale. What's your take?
Absolutely. I think, very often, I mean, we've all been customers and consumers and been on the other side of the table, is we may want to bank with, say, a brand like a Tata or Citibank or whatever large brands, or do advertising with a large company, or so there are brands that we look up to, and then when we actually interact with the individual who's been represented, or who's representing the organization, and we find this person is not that well, not that knowledgeable about what he's selling, or he's only looking at his own agenda of making a sale rather than looking at what's value for you, you start wondering, there's an immediate disconnect between brand and the experience you're having. And that's where the lack of trust comes in. So I think the credibility factor really comes from, are you competent? Do you know as a salesperson, if that's the specific research you're referring to,
You're right.
as a salesperson, are you knowledgeable about your products and services? Are you understanding of your customers' needs? And then are you doing an honest job of giving value to the customer through whatever you have to do? If you lack that basic, I don't think there is the next step of building the trust level at all.
Yeah, I kind of will agree with that. And, let me tell you this, that, end of day, that's a very fundamental learning that very often people miss out on. That's the reason why you'll find that good salespeople keep succeeding all the time, because they have that credibility. Vikram, I'm going to come to you, and I want to make a public confession. I don't know whether you have tried it or not, but there's a hair oil that says that if you apply it in your head for 10 days, it actually grows. And I want to make a public confession. I have bought that hair oil. And somebody here will vouch for it. I don't know about you, but I definitely have.
But did it help?
Well, that's exactly
you tried the hair oil, I tried the snake oil.
So my question to you will be, my question to you will be, and I'm serious about this hair oil story. It's hugely advertised. It costs a bomb. And, and end of day, the question to you is, when products do this kind of advertising, 10 days guarantee some growth. I mean, I'm sure there are some caveats that nobody reads, which applies to unfortunate people like us. Do you feel that is one where it's like the ultimate marketing hard sell, and the poor consumer can buy it, and then, you're like, Tata, bye-bye, it's okay?
No, if you're talking from a brand standpoint, it's suicide. If you're trying to make a claim that is going to be as absurd as that, which is not going to be which is not going to happen, in that case, your brand won't start. It'll be a non-starter. So, yeah, you might make a monkey out of somebody once, but chances are they'll definitely won't repeat it, and you won't even have a franchise to talk about. So, people might do it, but those aren't real brands, right?
I don't know.
So I'm not worried about those kind of guys. I think they're also brands. They're not the brands in it for the long haul. The ones who actually come in with non-credible claims.
Yeah, but let me tell you, they're occupying very prime mainstream media spots. And I don't want to take names, but there is one hugely advertised product or a company now if you open any TV channel, it's the first one that will hit you hard. It's all over the place.
So
okay?
let's talk about this unnamed guy who
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
quite sure I think also know who you're talking about.
Yeah,
I'll also throw an equation,
right.
as Ursula did. According to me, trust is equal to credibility plus reliability plus intimacy, whole thing added up divided by self-orientation.
Wow.
What does that mean? Now, with this
That sounds
unnamed-
like a calculus to me.
No, so bear with me for a sec. Credibility is what I'm saying should happen. So if it does, great. If I've got some great Ayurvedic products and because of that, certain things are being promised, certain organic things are being promised, there is a certain credibility promise that you're giving and you've got to live up to it. If you do, great. If you don't, you're in trouble. Reliability means you must be good and you must deliver the same thing time and time again
Right,
and have the same
right.
experience.
Right.
Intimacy is over time you actually build a proper relationship with the brand. The entire thing divided by self-orientation is if it's all about you the brand, and not about the consumer, then you've lost it. Take the politician example. Forget the credibility, that's suspect. Reliability, that's very suspect. And when intimacy, I don't know, some of them are pretty good. But self-orientation, they all fail because it's always about them. And I think that's where people lose the trick.
Okay, that's an interesting answer. But let me tell you something. I mean, this product is like, from what I read, is doing amazing sales. And I'll tell you how it works. I bought 2 bottles, and I went every 2 weeks and I looked in the mirror, and I began to believe there was growth. And I bought another 2 bottles, and I'm almost feeling like, hey, you know what? Maybe it's happening. People can't see it. That's their problem. It's an optical illusion. We'll come to that. Eric, let me,
Emperor's new clothes.
When you
Emperor's
spend,
new clothes.
When you spend that kind of money, you got to justify it.
You got to justify it. And let me also say that I want the panelists to jump in. I mean, you don't have to wait for me to come to you if you agree or
It's
disagree.
funny you mentioned that because I think that's the promise, unfortunately, many leaders give. They sell the ideal, not the practical, not the
Yeah.
outcome.
Yeah.
And so we all give trust by default.
Yeah.
We all believe over a period of time that what someone promises they will deliver.
Right.
It's whether it's earned. That's why I like the
Absolutely.
reliability part you put in there. That's why I like the self-orientation part that you added to the equation. Because you're right, you can be empathetic, but if you're not looking at the point of view of how you're impacting your brand promise,
Yeah.
it could so hopefully this product you have, maybe I can borrow it.
Yeah. I think.
You'll have to buy it.
Right.
No,
You'll
no.
have to buy it.
Yeah.
Oh, I should buy it.
Yeah.
But
Ursula,
so I think, but it's unfortunate because I think, I don't want to say taking advantage of, I haven't seen it, so I can't really speak to it. But unfortunately, it's not trying to take advantage of that period of time when people are trusting, hoping that what you're promising will be delivered. So maybe over a month, we'll see what happens.
yeah. We'll see what happens. I mean,
Send me some selfies.
Yeah. I've just sold a couple of cartons for Ursula here. Ursula,
Yeah.
my question to you. One of the things in the corporate world people talk very often is trust deficit. It's something that we all encounter in our jobs. I mean, especially senior leadership encounters it all the time. How much do you blame the trust deficit on the leaders of the organizations?
Well, I don't know if it's a blame, but I think it becomes a
Or accountability?
Yeah, accountable. I would say accountability. I would hold them very much accountable as we see a shift in generations, we have to see a shift in management styles and how we direct. When the directive environments where we can kind of demand and tell individuals, I think globally has shifted. I mean, maybe still in the military and other places where you can still be very demanding and very much to the point you do because I said. We have a workplace today that individuals in that workplace are not committed based on you just telling. They have to be coached, they have to be understood, and they have to be related to your sense as a leader. So I think that many times we come in as leaders feeling that we are doing those things. But it's at the end of the day, whether it's culture, whether it's employee engagement, if you look at the root of all those things, it's trust.
Yeah.
You know, if you're looking at a culture, you tell me a successful culture that's not established on trust.
Yeah.
if you look at employee engagement scores, the bottom line is trust. And they do look at the, there's an old axiom, the body always follows the head.
Yeah.
So the first place to look is with leadership. So that's where it should start, and that's where I believe we should hold ourselves accountable to.
Yeah, so you do agree that leadership has a very critical role
Most
to
definitely,
play.
most
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
And our statistics and our survey says that as well.
Yeah. And
If
yeah.
we can just sort of on the trust deficit piece, I would also like to believe that people will come in trusting and then see how it goes. And
Right.
I think the deficit, I would like to probably use Stephen Covey's emotional bank account
yeah.
analogy to say that you'll make deposits, you'll make withdrawals, just make sure you've got a net credit balance.
Right.
So somewhere along the line, the trust deficit will happen if you overdraw.
Yep. I
And if
think.
I could add one more reason, feeding off of that, is the fact that there's always if I can use an analogy, a honeymoon period. A person joins and all the things we promise and the things we whisper and all the different words we say to each other and where disengagement comes is where the promise is not kept or not met on either side, whether it's the employee or the leadership. And it's what we do at those times, whether we stand up and take accountability and responsibility.
Yeah,
for those
yeah,
things.
no, I quite agree. And I think that's the point. After the honeymoon period, the hair begins to fall. Kashmira, coming to you. I mean, this is an uncomfortable question.
Oops.
Yeah, I mean, that's my job. But I think it relates to trust on an issue that I think has become very relevant for India to debate, and we should not live in denial. Do you think that the Me Too movement is somewhere a manifestation of that betrayal of trust? Where men have over several years abused their powers over many vulnerable women. And in a great number of ways, I think the Me Too movement is perhaps the appropriate backlash against that. But it does reflect somewhere in the past, and I'm sure even in the current, that there are many relationships that have experienced a very serious betrayal of trust. And I ask you that because you're a
So
woman.
I question that actually to say, why just the Me Too movement? Any sort of such large movements or such large debates that we've had in the world, any sort of problems that you've encountered which have taken national, literally headlines, always have started with this, deficiency of trust or a certain unfairness. So it's not just the Me Too movement which has this. I mean, you look at from time immemorial, you track world history, and whenever there has been a problem, at the core has been one of the softer attributes. Either it's fairness, it's dignity and respect, or it's some sort of, today it's some form of harassment. Everything starts like this. In fact, if you look at the largest problems we've had in corporate life in the world over, everyone talks about, oh, it was an ethical issue. There was a conflict of interest problem. But nobody raises the flag while you're at it. But when there's a problem, you really find it was a trust deficit. So everybody waves the flag only when it really becomes a huge, big issue. So, yeah, to answer that question, I think it is, but it's not just the Me Too movement. I think every problem we've encountered in the world today is blown out of proportion. It's actually had one of these softer, smaller attributes. And therefore, I think all these things, we have to stop calling them, softer attributes or softer skills. I think they're critical today.
Critical skills.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's very, very critical to
Right.
start, pushing our generation, the millennials and the corporates and business entrepreneurs, startups, whatever it is, how important it is to do your business with a lot of trust.
Okay. Pallavi, I'm going to bring you on a question on a character that I think you personally admire a lot, Elon Musk. He's been the big story, the Tesla man. Look at him today. I mean, one tweet and Mr. Musk is in serious trouble. And 20 million in charges from the SEC, question marks in terms of manipulating information. Now there are charges that some profitability figures may not have been right. I mean, what do you do when you are Musk and you want to land your rocket on the moon? You are the hottest guy in town. You're dating Amber Heard, and here you are. Here you are in some serious trouble. There are some trust issues here. How do you explain that? I mean, do you think this is the risk of celebrity or what?
Well, I think my admiration for Elon Musk is coming from his genius. And I think a lot of geniuses have a problem going with a standard mold of behavior.
You're
So
not
they're
justifying it. You're not
No,
justifying it.
so I'm saying, so that's about Musk. Does that mean I admire him for the way he talks to people, the way he manages his affairs? Possibly not. So it's a selective admiration. Now what happens? Here's a man who actually was a genius, has managed to win the trust, by the way, of so many people who have invested with him, who worked for him, created those fancy cars, created all the stuff. Here's a man who, by the way, when Puerto Rico went under, said, I will electrify Puerto Rico, right? So he has a different approach to world. That said, all that trust that he could garner because of his ideas and because of his genius can instantly, with 138 characters on social media, just vanish, right? So how fragile something like trust can be is that it takes, I completely agree with what Kashmira said earlier, it cannot happen, trust doesn't get built with one interaction.
Right.
But it can get killed with one interaction, it can get killed with one experience. So that's really the story. You've got to really work, like Ursula said, be very purposeful about building trust in relationships. And if you drop the hat, I mean, what is it? You drop the, if you drop it, it just vanishes.
So basically you're saying that it takes a lot of effort to build trust, and it takes just one bad decision or one tweet, one speech, one whatever, blunder, and then you're in a deep black hole. That's true.
You know, she brings up a significant point, because my thought is that, we all know, I think it's important to be proactive to build trust. And I think it's everybody's intent, to build trust. The integrity part is, what do I do after that? I think as companies across the world need to be better at how do we restore trust. What do? We do live in a very targeted, one tweet, one thought, one mistake can ruin the credibility of many unintentional or even intentional ways of doing things. Can we be better at restoring it? Can we be better at, because how much does it cost to replace the damage that not having trust brings? So there's a deficit. I'm of the belief, and maybe I'm ideal in my thought, that you can rebuild and restore trust if we have the capacity to teach or at least empower our teams and our leaders to have that capability to not just to build it, but to restore it when required and necessary. There are times when you need to make those tough and hard decisions so it doesn't impact your organization overall.
And by the way, talking about that, how do you rebuild, or what do you really need to do? What is trust? I mean, that one level trust is you're credible. The other level of trust is I trust I can be myself with you, that it's safe to make a mistake and nothing will come out of it, right? That's genuine trust, is when teams work together in an organization, you say that I can make a mistake, I can be vulnerable, people know my weaknesses, and I trust people not to leverage any of that against me. That is fundamental trust.
Okay. We'll come back to that, and I'll probably bring in Glassdoor down the line. I mean, all CEOs, I can tell you from I know, every time they wake up in the middle of the night, they go to Glassdoor. Ooh. Okay, here we are. What keeps the CEO awake in the night? Glassdoor. All right.
Not the ceiling.
Not the ceiling. Coming to you, I mean, Vikram, Nestle is a great brand, phenomenal company. I mean, brand as in a corporate brand. You know what happened with Maggi noodles? I remember the first time Maggi noodles came on the market, all of us had it for 10 days for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And suddenly the whole story in Maggi noodles just collapsed. The company blamed it on external factors. Nobody knows the truth. But how does a brand like that recover? I mean, it links to what actually Ursula said. The trust that you can bounce back. I think Maggi noodles is a bounce back story. How does it happen?
Obviously, it's the absolute nightmare that all marketers that's the thing which they probably they wake up to at night. It's not only, Maggi was probably the most celebrated one because it actually went off the shelves for several months. Cadbury had a problem at some point in time with some worms supposedly in it.
Right, right.
Coke, where both Ursula and I worked, had, in fact, a real oblique one. It was pesticide or fertilizers in the soil. The water is actually being taken out and going into your soft drink brand after all the kind of purification that goes, and if there's some traces left in that, that's because you put it in. So there've been some pretty ridiculous theories about why a brand is bad. In most cases, actually, the brand is completely safe, and it's just the kind of spin that has happened which has created the problem. In these cases, I think proactive engagement with your customer base becomes a very important sort of strategy. Sometimes some of the people have chosen to lie low and not engage. I think that's a mistake, especially when a brand is very loved, because people at that point in time are hungry for information and for restoration of trust. If you can do it with authenticity, and if you can do it with sincerity of purpose, actually, you'll probably win them back. And that's what probably all these three brands, including Maggi, did.
Okay.
But the damage is pretty intense, because even after that, I don't think it's gone back to its original shape.
It hasn't gone back to that. But I think it got hammered, and it was a favorite of the family and young children, and if it's been able to stage even 50% of the comeback is quite remarkable.
More than that.
More than that. Oh, that's pretty good numbers. Ursula, coming back to you again. Dale Carnegie is something that you're very much part of. So do you think that the whole story of this trust that we're talking about starts with an individual? First, do you trust yourself? I mean, hey, end of the day, if you don't love yourself, can you love others?
Right.
Is that where it begins from?
I believe one definition of trust is if something or someone can be relied upon. So, and I think that's a question we all have to ask ourselves. And I think that has to go from ourselves to our leadership team. Can we be relied upon?
Can we be relied
upon? Right? And if we can be relied upon, then how do we encourage or empower our team to feel that we're relying on each other? So I do think it actually starts with self. That when I look up in the morning, one of the biggest challenges for me 4 years ago is coming into this role, that taking a position of being considered, I'll be the keeper of Dale Carnegie's flame for over 100 years, and the magnitude that had. And that was very challenging, because to me, it was a legacy brand, and yet a brand that still needed to be promoted even more so in the workplace today based on some of the challenges.
Right.
And can I hold true to that based on my perspective? So I have to first ask myself, and then I have to get to my team to do that as well. So I think it does start with yourself.
I mean, let me put it like this. Do you think a person who's untrustworthy will see the world as untrustworthy?
I think they can, but it's all about perspective. It's all about, the person who sees the world as untrustworthy can be very successful looking at the world as being untrustworthy. And unfortunately, there have been too many, in my opinion, successful people look at the world that way.
Yeah.
I don't want to bring up U.S. politics or things like that, because we're not talking about that. But there's two. It depends on how you look at success. I look at success. You can be successful in any way of doing business and not be trustworthy. But I don't think.
But Ursula, you can bring in U.S. politics. We have no problem with that.
Right. But I don't think it has significance.
Right.
See, success you can do for yourself, and that you can do it with or without trust.
Yeah.
But significance, in my opinion, you can't do without trust, because I'm doing something on behalf of others.
Right.
And I think that's one thing that Dale Carnegie has brought, that we realize early on, and that's what I think the genius of Dale Carnegie is. He realized early on that individuals, you can't have success on your own, and you can't really make it significant unless you make it through your people.
Get it.
So that's where the sustained success
Yes,
comes in.
yes.
How do you survive generations?
Yes.
And the longevity of corporations.
I have a personal quote that says, your repetitions create your reputation.
Yeah.
Whatever you repeatedly do over a period of time. So if I'm untrustworthy one day and trustworthy the next day, it's a long time.
It's not going to happen, It's not going to happen,
So it's something that you have to build over time.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to do it, hold yourselves accountable to.
Kashmir, I remember that, when we were passing out of our MBA, joining the Tata Administrative Service was the biggest thing on the campus you could get hold of. your group as a whole is very respected for its brand and its equity, blah, blah, blah. But there's a question that is often asked, and in fact, we had a chat internally in our own office the other day. Do nice guys finish last? That's Murphy's Law. So the guy who's untrustworthy, smart, charmer, glib talker, the numbers may not look good, but I have a way to present it. I dazzle you with it.
Yeah.
So do nice guys finish last? He works hard, 9 to 7, goes home, gets all the numbers right, customers are happy, wife is happy, colleagues are happy, everyone is happy, but the promotions don't come, the compensation is not that great. Does it happen?
Well, I'm sure it happens.
So do you feel nice guys finish last?
No, I don't agree with this 100%. I think...
But you agree 99%?
No. I think the world is fairly balanced, and some nice guys do finish first, and some nice guys do finish last. So I think that there's a way in which you also need to handle yourself, and if the nice guy is nice enough, he probably begins to look at saying, why am I finishing last? So he's nice enough to recognize that. I mean, I understand that this is not a 100% rule, but this is how I look at it. You know, I'm sure your question is more linked to, you know, do you want to do business ethically, or, you know, do you want me to do business, or do you want me to run ethics?
That's right.
I really don't think that the world gives us choices, not anymore. I think we have to do business which is run ethically, and we have to grow. If you don't grow, you'll just be wiped out of the whole corporate scenario.
Right.
Yeah, and if you don't do business ethically, somebody is going to catch up with you at some point of time. You know, you may be able to kind of survive once, survive a second time, and the way we have seen things which get unearthed, I don't think you survive. So whether it's a brand, like you said, which really didn't do too much wrong, and still you have only 50% of your market share back or whatever. Yeah, so
but it's been like 1.5 years, so not too long.
So I don't think there are either or options anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think, and particularly, you know, when we look at startups and we talk to startups and fresh entrepreneurs, they're very happy to look at business, doing business right. So I think, like you said, you know, when everyone enters, everyone wants to do it right. Nobody wants to do wrong things. People want to trust each other. Because obviously the moment somebody throws a question at you, or asks you for help, or asks you for a favor, or asks you to actually execute a project, there's already a trust element. Otherwise somebody won't approach you. It's then entirely up to you how you're going to play that trust element out. Are you going to live up to that trust? Are you going to betray that trust? So I think the trust element is always there.
Well, you know, there's a big joke about ethics actually. It says, right, wrong, or everybody does it, so will I. But you're right. I mean, it's non-negotiable that at the end of the day, I mean, if you compromise on the ethics, then there are serious problems. But you and I are reading the same book, and there's some hope for the nice people in the audience. The answer that you said is absolutely right. Nice guys do finish last, but not all of them. In fact, equal number of nice guys are at the top. So it's a fairly balanced distribution. So, you know, possibly you got to be a nice guy, but, you know, if you still manage to do it right, you are going to be at the top.
Here's what I feel about it, and I've heard that, we had this conversation before this, and I really feel I'm nice about relationships, but I'm hard about results.
You're hard about results.
Yeah, oh yes, but my ability to be nice and connect gives me more access to hold people accountable. The greatest gift any leader gives their people is accountability. But if I want to be accountable, there's something has to happen before that to hold them accountable. And that's connecting with trust. So whether you choose to be nice or whatever that is, I mean, I know it's a colloquialism, but if I choose to connect with people, it gives me more insight and to hold them accountable for the results we're looking for.
You're right,
And I think sometimes that's the missing step. We go first to hold people accountable, and we haven't made our bank accounts help build trust to hold them accountable to the level we want to. So we kind of flip the equation, you know. So I want to be the nicest person in the world. At the end of the day, I need my results.
But I think today everybody is results focused. I don't see any organization which would work without targets and without results. But as long as you're fair, you're transparent, you know, you're having communication at your regular intervals, you know, people will understand when they fail. So you may really need to leave, but people will understand. There won't be an accusation of unfairness.
You know, there's a certain, if you link trust with integrity in a way, there is one test. It's a game theory test. There's you and the society. There are certain things which are bad considered by society and bad considered by you. So I will not murder somebody. because society also doesn't murder anybody, so that's not a tested issue. Similarly, there are some great things that both society and you do, but when you really get tested is when society is doing one way and it's not correct, there's right, there's wrong. Society out here in Bombay will jump the light. A few of us
That's more a
will not
Delhi
jump the
thing,
light.
but still, yeah.
So we will, some of us will not jump the light even if it's a red and other people have moved, but you haven't. That's where your integrity is being tested.
Yeah.
So I think when the rest of the world is doing it, and so that's where in the context of corruption, somebody else is giving a bribe to somebody to get some work done.
So will I.
So
Yeah.
why let me also do it, I'll just do it. That's, your integrity gets tested when the society is doing something wrong and you choose not to.
That's right. That's what I said. Everybody does it, so I have a license to do it as well. I mean, we are going to come to you very soon with your questions. But Pallavi, a question to you. I don't know how to put it across, but do you believe in blind faith? I remember Ronald Reagan once said, "Trust, but just verify."
Yeah.
It's this very famous quote.
Trust and
Yeah,
verify,
yeah,
right?
trust and then verify. So, do you think there's something as blind faith? I mean, you've got wonderful people in the company who work for you, and I'm sure you trust them. But would you have blind faith, or would you have some, as they say, checks?
So I believe, so I'm a rationalist, okay, and I don't believe in blind faith. But what happens over a period of time is when you interact with somebody and you gain experience, and it's that reliability piece, that a series of experiences helps you gain confidence in somebody, then you start blindly trusting individuals. So, or individuals in situations. May not be individuals for everything, but for particular things. So I think there is an element of blind trust, but it has to be earned, and it can also be, like we discussed earlier, it can also be broken instantly. So I think it never starts off as blind faith. I mean, it's not like your belief in God, So people that start off with a blind faith, and I'm again not one of those. But in relationships, I think it always begins with a series of positive experiences which help build that trust. And once that level of trust is built, then you say, I can trust this person to do this. Yeah.
Okay. No, I think that's a valid point. May I kindly request somebody here to keep your mobile on silent, please, just with respect for the other guests. Okay, one question to you. This whole thing about celebrity endorsement. The reason why I'm coming to Vikram on these issues is because he's a master in that industry. Celebrity endorsements. Do you really think Deepika Padukone uses that Chinese phone? I mean, there are people who ask this question. They advertise. I asked my own chap who drives with me every day. He's been my driver for the last 20 years, and he is not convinced that Ranveer Singh is using that Lux whatever. And end of day, I think these are the questions that I think we need to ask. Celebrities, they endorse anything left, right, and center. Where is the, everybody knows you got a right to earn money and, promote yourself. But why would you do it with products that you're not even seen in sync with? Why would Shah Rukh Khan, for example, do a fairness cream? I can do it. Why Shah Rukh Khan?
Okay, it's like this. I'm not going to get into the ethical, I'm just going to get into a very practical thing of does it work or does it not work, right? So yes, so we got every hero in all the macho guys are all doing banyans under the vests, right? So do they wear them?
Banyans and underwear.
And they did, and Hawaii chappals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Look at the very basic level, how these brands work, how these celebrities work is they cut clutter. If you
They cut?
clutter.
Clutter.
So if you just had an average Joe on the street or average model in the street doing the same thing, and you have a celebrity doing it, table stakes are with the same amount of money that you have to do with advertising that you do. Maybe you could go spend 10 times or 7 or 8 times the kind of media weights to get the same recall of your brand just because the star is there. Without even this, right now the brand values of the star haven't even been cut in. It's just the cut-through value of the star. So that's got a lot of value. After that, the entire ability of what exactly is the star bringing to the brand. In some cases, you need there are some brands, for example, when they used Amitabh Bachchan, Cadbury used Amitabh Bachchan for when we were talking about that entire worms issue, he actually went and said, the company came to me, I checked out their plants,
Yeah.
and I reassured myself that the product was good. If you believe me, then believe in the brand. I thought that was very powerful. Now, at the same time, these same West ads, what is the kind of endorsement or what is the kind of brand value or credibility that you're seeking? Are you really seeking the thing that he wears it, so I will wear it? Probably not. The decoding that you're doing at that point in time is that this is a brand for people like me because I aspire to be the people like them.
Okay.
So there is a certain projection of the kind of image, of self-image, which is coming through the very, very escapist ad that is coming on TV.
Got it. I got you.
So let's not take these celebrity things as, God, does he use it or does she use it, and therefore is she sort of qualified to endorse it. I think that's a very shallow way of looking at it.
Okay, that's an interesting point. I'm sure the audience will have a couple of questions on that one, because you find, nowadays film actors also, kind of endorsing banks. And, that's an interesting one that maybe at some point, Kashmira, you can come in. I want to ask this question to all four of you, very quickly. Diamonds, they say, are forever. Trust is not. Right? What are the obstacles to trust? I mean, give me one reason. I mean, we can talk about this till the cows come home. According to your experience, Ursula, let's start with you from your side, and let's go this way. Biggest obstacle to trust is what? What comes
from my perspective or leaders?
from your experience, maybe?
I think being authentic,
Being authentic.
being
okay?
real, keeping it real with people. You said something, transparency, which I agree with. Transparency and authenticity is key. And it's amazing whether we athletes or actors, we put these masks on. I think we go in an organization, we put masks on, and it doesn't lose our credibility just being real and authentic. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges.
Okay, so according to your authenticity, Pallavi, big obstacle to trust in relationships.
I think just not walking your talk.
Okay.
So making your promises and not fulfilling them is the surefire way of not getting trust.
And remember, you can never kind of trust any promise made when the person is drunk, when the person is in love, or when the person is running for office. Never trust them. Okay.
I'm in trouble with 2 of the 3.
Yeah. So I'm going to come to you on this one. Your big obstacle?
To trust, I think personal greed.
Personal greed.
Yeah, personal greed, or putting, like you said, the denominator. Everything for me is at the center. So I want to do it right, but I will suffer, or my targets will suffer, or you will do better than I will do, or so I think that is a huge problem where people kind of sometimes deviate.
Right.
And that's where, in an organization perspective, processes come in. So you have processes to actually realize that if something like this can happen,
Right.
so how do I stop a person from doing this?
Right.
Sometimes we spoke about blind faith and blind trust. I think it's also about, convenient blindness. So when we know sometimes as senior people in organizations that something is not right, but you choose to ignore it because there's a benefit somewhere else.
Yeah.
So till it's not on my table, in my room, in my backyard, I will ignore it for a while.
Right.
So I think personal greed, huge. And it's not just need, I'm talking of greed.
No, that's interesting. So you have authenticity, one, promises made that you can't deliver on, and personal, stakes far ahead of what you probably, will not be an equal stakeholder in.
Ditto on Ursula and Pallavi, authenticity and walking the talk.
These two will be the main ones.
I
So
want to
That's
also
a
add,
credibility, reliability.
there's a credibility.
I think generally, I think overall speaking, one big challenge is I think we're all socialized to compete for success, right? We live in a competitive world. And in a competitive world, we typically land up actually becoming very political, right? When you become very political, you land up just working with protecting your backs. And there is an element of not opening up that space for trust. It's just the nature of the way our organizations are organized, our society is organized. Everything is, I have to get ahead of you to succeed. So the definition of success possibly makes for an environment that doesn't foster trust easily or doesn't nurture trust easily.
Well, that's true. I think, let me tell you, so far we have been having a chat on the panel, try to cover various aspects. We're looking at all these 4 people, highly successful, and they're all kind of masters of their own universe. And so we have tried to dig deep into where you come from on this issue. Now is probably a good time to see what the audience wants to really ask you. I'm not done yet, so I'll give you some time. Please put up your hand.
It's there.
Please put up your hand and tell us your name and keep your question brief and tell us who you're asking the question of. Can you kindly move the mics quickly, please? Yeah? Who's moving the mic on this side? Yeah. Please, your name and your question, please.
Yeah, good evening, sir. I am Gaurav Pandey. I'm from a company known as Garden Rich Builders.
Okay.
My question is to the lady from Tata Capitals. Though it is addressed to the whole panel here, we are using the American example where corporate firms run the business as the benchmark for trust. If we tend to see the European model where family-owned businesses are still running, that's why Tata, I'm referring this question to, luxury brands and all, they are all family-owned businesses. So isn't there a fine difference between selling yourself and buying goodwill? Because businesses where you have to work quarter and quarter, the selling pressure is more than the buying goodwill part of it. So how do you think that the basic ethos and the basic concept on which firms like Tata's or family-owned businesses, global firms also, are run are very different from corporate firms who have to look at things quarter to quarter?
Okay.
So I'm a little confused. You're putting the Tata brand as a family-run business?
Yeah, I'm trying to put you into a family.
So we're not.
But it is not.
No, but still as a,
Let me first
but there's
tell
a,
you, Mr. Bhagwat might want to say a little more on that. We're not a family-run business at all.
At all.
I think I'd like to clarify that. 3 decades with the Tata Group, I have never seen anything run like a family. But I think every corporate has to, I don't think any company, whether it's a Tata company or anyone else today, does not monitor quarter to quarter. I think it's really required for survival. I'm sure Pallavi, you do it, and I'm sure Andrew, you do it, we do it. I know sometimes it's not just quarter to quarter, it's month on month. Right?
Yeah.
So, and we're constantly doing MTRs, and so I think those luxury days are totally over, where you sat back and said, oh, it's okay, you didn't make profit, better luck next time. It doesn't work like that anymore. Yeah, some brands, and I talk about myself, the pressure on us is we have to better it, our targets will keep changing, we will still do it right.
Yeah.
So there's no either or. So, and I'm sure many of us do it, some of us just talk a little more about it.
Yeah.
So I don't think any organization tells you, you can use unethical means. Nobody does that. Nobody at least talks about it.
Yeah.
So,
and many of the family businesses are listed anyway.
Absolutely.
I mean, to assume that family businesses are not listed and don't have to worry about quarter to quarter is by itself it could be slightly erroneous out there. Other questions, please?
There was a gentleman
Yes.
there.
Okay, and can we have some women put up their hands, please? We want this to be a gender parity debate. So, yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay, your
okay,
question?
so I have a question. So just a
What's your
contrary.
name, please?
I'm Gaurav Gupta.
From?
And Boinger Ingelheim.
Okay,
I
go
work
ahead.
as a HR business partner over
Your
there.
question too?
Yeah, so my question to the panel. So first of all, I'd like to appreciate him for the concepts that he gave. Credibility, reliability, intimacy divided by self-orientation. Really nice.
Right.
That's what you refer trust to. So
Right.
a contrary kind of question. In short run, life is unfair. In long run, we all are dead. Why so much fuss about trust?
There's a fuss about trust. I like that.
I think, well, that's a good one. I think the reason why the trust issues, there is a difference between the short run and the long run, hopefully is a good one. But anyway, would somebody in the panel like to respond? In the long run, we are all
Unfair
dead.
and then dead. What's
And
the
the
matter?
short
why
term
is
life
such a
is
big
unfair. But you know, there's a gap. I think he's probably assuming that that gap is
Short-term
very
life
narrow.
Unfair. In the long term, we are all dead. So why the fuss about trust?
Well, Ian, that's the thing. First of all, that's a
Are you working with Uber?
God, if you-
Were you working
Right,
with
right.
Uber sometime before?
Look, if you
Well,
if you
first of
want
all,
to live your entire 70 or 80 years in that state of entropy of distrust or untrust, then that's a sad way to live. So it's a long enough life here. Then live it well.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, you know, it's a legitimate question. In fact, there's a great title of a book. What's the fuss about trust? I'm going to take that one and use that. The fuss about trust is that without it, you got chaos. That's the fuss about it, is that now you can still work through chaos and get results, but it'd be very competitive, a lot of discord. If you look at employee engagement numbers, any significant thing that has happened over the last 40 years in organizations today, the root has been trust.
yeah.
And so that's the fuss about it. We're finally getting to the root. We've talked about processes, we've talked about systems, we've talked about people, we talked about customer service, we're talking about customer experience now. The root is trust. So why don't we just go to the root and we could shorten the period of time it takes to get the results we're looking for. But thank you for that title for the new book. What's the fuss about trust?
No, but I think the reason why I mentioned Uber actually is because that's the great startup, phenomenal story, but you had a terrible work culture issue, complete breakdown of trust, and can you imagine you had the Attorney General actually creating a culture audit? Can you imagine? I mean, can you imagine what happened to Uber? Still a great company, still going great guns, I'm sure, but serious work culture issues. Your question, sir. Can you quickly move the mics, ladies and gentlemen? Yeah? Yeah, okay, we'll come to you, your question, and then we'll come to you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
go
This is Divya. I'm from 24/7.ai.
Yeah.
So my question is more to do with the corporate. It happens to all of us when we're working with some of the business units. It is possible that an entire business unit, there is trust deficit, right? And as an internal consultant, you know, where do I start? Of course, usually what we go, the way we go about it is we start with leadership. Is that the right way to, any other input would be great.
Okay, Pallavi, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, you want to go first?
Oh, you go first. That's fine.
Okay, so for me, I think I would add one more element to the variables that Vikram put out in the equation, and I think there is a bit of social skills that are required. I think communication is one of the reasons for lack of trust, or lack of communication, or communication gaps is one of the reasons for lack of trust. So I think the best place to start is to open up lines of communications, both upwards, downwards, sideways, and everywhere. Because it's not very often we find that it's not really the intent and it's not really the lack of promise or the desire, or even the having delivered the promise but not having communicated so, which actually causes a lot of problems, especially in teams and organizations.
If I could build off of that, because again, you may want to do it, but may not have the skills to do it. You know, and those skills, those innate skills are at every level of the organization. And you talk about communication, and we ask everyone, I'll ask this group, when we talk about communication, what's more important, speaking or listening? Who would say speaking is more important than listening? By a show of hands, who would say listening? All right, most of the hands go up. Everywhere in the world, I go, people say listening. So then I ask the question, well, how many of you during any of our period of development taken some type of public speaking course or communication course, and everybody's hands go up? Then ask how many of you have taken a leadership course on listening? Then less than 10% of the audience raise their hands.
So true.
Because what we do is we just throw more devices that's listening. It's an aid, but it's not a skill. So when we teach our senior leadership teams, the listening is analogous to building trust. Then they stop. I ask every in my executive coaching people, I'm starting a new group. What do? Listen.
Yeah.
Get to know your people. Know what they do. Understand why they do it. And how many times we take for people to have on my agenda of things to do, getting to build trust with my people.
Yeah.
Now here's the thing, your boss want to ask you how much time you're spending building trust with your people, but what we ask is the result you'll get from spending that time with your people.
Okay, sir, your question? Yeah.
Thank you.
Your question?
Okay, my name is Dr. Ranjeev Manrao. I'm into business of management consulting. First of all, I'd like to thank the panel as well as Dale Carnegie for bringing such wonderful topic and such a work. I'm sure the whole audience here is worked up with what's happening on trust and things happening. My question coming here is, I've picked up few things from your discussion and I want to ask a question. It's about fragility of trust. How it, as they say, it takes years to build the trust and it goes in few seconds, and it was one of the things mentioned in the discussion here also. But in some cases, we have seen that there are two factors I'm taking about. One is competence, which leads to trust, and second is integrity of a person, as we can talk about. Now, in certain cases, the fragility is not seen as strong. Like yesterday's Times of India talks about Suhail Seth. All of us have read about it. Most of
He's
the
a very good friend of mine. No, that's meant to be sarcastic because he writes against me. Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. And many other brands, like we mentioned about Maggie, have seen a lot of drop overnight because of certain things. But certain cases, I remember seeing a video of Tata's, how they handled the 2611 issue. And that brought a lot of trust into the thing. Tata's and Godrej are two biggest brands who have built trust over maybe a century or so.
So what's your question then?
My question is, in certain cases, the trust is very fragile. In certain cases, it is not. To close the question, I want to ask, certain times it's very surprising, particularly godmen. There are certain people you see that they do the biggest blunder and the trust is not broken. How does that happen?
Okay, Godman, that's an area I stay away from. Somebody from the panel would like to bite that one?
Why Godmen are still trusted?
Yeah. They even win votes.
I guess it goes back to that blind faith thing that
I
we were
was,
talking
yeah.
about.
Yeah.
And there are some people who are not, who are exercising that. It will work for them.
Yeah.
It may not work for the more rational set.
Yeah.
Emotionally rational.
But
Even
without
common sense.
and without mentioning personalities, but many of them have had very peculiar stories at the end. And but then it's human beings are vulnerable. I remember, I'll be very honest with you, my own mother, she was a very simple woman, but she had this great faith in this one person. And when my brother was sitting for the IAS exams, she was just convinced that this man said कि आपका बेटा IAS हो जाएगा. So she was convinced कि मेरा बेटा IAS हो जाएगा, क्योंकि पंडित जी ने कहा है. So I think it's a faith. It's something very intangible, and I believe almost irrational, but it exists. I agree with you. Can we have a few more questions?
Hello. Good evening, sir.
Yeah, please.
Good evening, panelists. I am Professor Vidya Srinivas, representing Universal Business School.
Okay.
I'm reading a book by Ray Dalio, which talks about radical truth and radical transparency. Is India Inc. ready for radical transparency? That's one question. And the second question is, do you trust grapevine?
Okay, and who's this very interesting question to?
Anyone could address.
Okay, so let's
Thank
see
you.
who wants to bite this one. Is India ready for radical transparency? I'm tempted to take that, but then will talk for half an hour, so I will ignore it. One of the three?
So so I can comment on the grapevine part. In my role as the Chief Ethics Counselor, we very often get anonymous complaints, and I'm sure that happens to any HR person in the room also, or CEOs in the room. Yeah, the point is, do you want to ignore it? Do you want to accept it? Do you want to take action? What do you want to do? So that's where you go back to saying, in God we trust, everybody else needs data, needs to come in with data. So I also link that to intuition, that all of us, and I particularly think women, no gender bias here, but I think women have a higher intuition sense normally. So I know when someone comes in and says, this is what is happening, so I say, you know what, I kind of trust you, but go back and find the data and get it. So when you do get grapevine, or where you get anonymous concerns, and it depends on how important is it to investigate. If it's something which is not going to help, if it's not going to be detrimental, you might as well ignore it. But if it is something which might help the organization and its people, or if not acted on could be detrimental to individuals or an organization, you need to look into it. But you've got to have your maturity there to say, if you don't find sufficient amount of data, you must know when to back off.
Yeah.
So I think the word is really balance everywhere and maturity. So how far do you want to dig? How much of resource do you want to deploy? Because in any sort of investigation that you do, you might be harming someone. So you've got to be very careful about this. And really, this is what is happening today, even with social media. How responsibly do we utilize this? So all of us who may not be the originators of some message, be a little cautious when you're passing it on. And I think it starts with us.
Okay.
On your radical transparency, especially from a corporate standpoint, what I have grown up with, and I think Pallavi and I grew up with that indoctrination in our first organization that we worked in, was need to know. There's a need to know and there's a nice to know.
I think you should tell them that you were together in Procter and Gamble, right?
That's right.
After that, they shut shop in India and moved to Singapore.
We started together at P&G. So there's a need to know, and if there is and literally, why do you need to know a particular piece of whatever it might be, which requires a transparency? So there's a need to know, and it's a material, then you should. But if it's nice to know, then probably not.
And let me add a point here, but when you said grapevine really works in those companies whose internal communications are terrible. That's where humor mongering takes over. Simple. Simple is a very simple explanation. We don't have too much of time, so we're just going to take the last 3 questions and wrap up. Bhagwat Saab, you have a question, and then any 2 more, and then we wrap up. Yeah.
Hi, sir. My name is Ahana Agarwal.
Just 1 minute. I'm coming to you. I'm just coming to you after this. Yeah. Mr. Bhagwat?
First of all, I don't have a question. I do want to make an observation.
Sir, can you keep the mic a little closer, sir?
I don't have a question, but I do have an observation.
Okay.
As a former CEO and also as someone who worked very closely in the Tata Group for this brand equity, in fact, we created this expression, leadership with trust. I want to give a very simple facet of trust, which on a day-to-day basis in a business organization, at least we found, works very well. And that facet is that as a business, we have a mission, we have a purpose, and we serve our customers. And when we serve our customers, there are expectations. And my suggestion is, I want to urge the team that we have here, meet those expectations or exceed those expectations. If you do that, you create trust. And this is a very simple way of succeeding. I mean, otherwise, the other facets of trust are so complex, they will be debated upon. And like Kashmira rightly pointed out, the ethics issue also can be brought into as far as the trust is concerned. But from a business perspective, from a success of a business, and you have such a wonderful mission, such a wonderful purpose. I mean, here in many ways, Dale Carnegie is doing what I call nation building, and which is very important today for a country like ours. It's providing the skills, providing the kind of the talent that we are creating. That is going to be helpful for us in the long run. So with that kind of a purpose, we must first meet the expectations of the customer. That creates trust. That's my observation.
Thank you very much. I think those are very important words, that if you exceed expectations, I mean, it creates a very different level of trust. I mean, fantastically well said. Pallavi, a big compliment to you that Carnegie does nation building in terms of building up the whole scale. I'm just going to, we are a little short on time. I've got a couple of people heckling me from the side. So what we're going to do is, you had a question there. We're going to take 3 questions together, and we will just kind of answer it very quickly. Any 2 hands? 1. 2. You have Karon there, 2.
And a gentleman at the back.
And you have a gentleman back at the 3. And we'll take all these 4 questions and then we'll answer it together. Please, go ahead.
Hi, sir. My name is Ahana Agarwal, and I represent my company called the Nice Systems from Pune. My question to the panel is that in your experience and from the corporate context, do you think that leaders have to first place trust on people before gaining trust? And is that the process to gain trust? And in your experience, how many leaders give second chance to people when that trust is betrayed?
Okay, very good question there. Can we come to the next one there? You have, I think, Karon and then the gentleman at the back. Quickly. Can we move the mics faster? Run. Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Kiran Shaiva, and my question really is related to the definition of trust and why it happens. Pallavi mentioned that basically people are not bad. It's not bad intent so much as it is perhaps a communication gap. And I'll just take that a little further now, pose the question. Is it because we need to redefine our value systems?
Okay.
Especially considering the emerging world where diversity, inclusion, and sustainability is so key to making this a better world. What do you think about
Okay, very valid question. We are, moving to a more diverse world. Yes?
Yeah, hi, my name
Mayur,
is
yeah.
Yes, yes. So, Pallavi, thank you so much. I really liked your things about trust, that authenticity is one of the key factor apart from vulnerability and all. My question to you is, in order to be authentic, for any leaders, awareness is the most important part. Because if we are not aware, we pretend to be authentic, which is projected authenticity. We feel something else, but we project something else. And thereby there is complete incongruence between, and thereby it's not walking the talk, but talking something else, but walking very, very differently. And thereby, leadership is not only trust is not only a self-concept and conceptual exercise, but it's also a very deep level self-work towards building self-awareness.
Okay.
That's my first question. Second question is linked to that, and I think it's very important to ask at this point in time. I was in US and Raj Sisodia, I was interacting with Professor Raj Sisodia, who has written a book called Organization of Endearment. And his entire book is all about trust. So he has taken the entire work from good to great, built to last, to Organization of Endearment. And he has done 10 years of longitudinal research, and he says that trust is not a soft touch feel, it's actually hardcore business. It's actually result into business. And he has gone ahead projecting the data. He has done the study of S&P 500. He said the 10-year S&P 500 total ROI, value creation, is 154%. Good to great is around 186%. Organization of endearment is around 1,655%. So he says that trust is nothing but it's actually one of the very important lever of doing business. And he has done that study for 10 years. Now my question to all of you is, in India, because in order to have the trust of the leader about trust, is this the right time to actually take the first step in that direction and have some very concrete, result-oriented, measurable kind of steps beyond the discussion and roundtable and everything, so that we can have the trust of the people who are leading those businesses?
Okay, good point. So you're basically asking a question on how awareness and trust can be made into a measurable profit and top line. Last question, over to you. Can you keep it nice and brief? Yeah?
Yes. So my name is Piyush Parekh. I'm from Global Talent Track, Pune. My question is, like, if we have an employee and over a series of sequence, we have built a trust on him, and the same person creates a blunder and it's creating a very huge loss to a company. And if same person walks up to the management asking, I have made this blunder, so does the trust is hampered, and in the situation he might lose a job as well. So
Right.
how does management look to such type of a person?
Okay, so we had 4 questions, and after this, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to wrap up. There's one on second chances. I would like Ursula you to take that. Pallavi, question on value systems and its relevance. Why don't you take that? Kashmira, if I can give you the one that Mayur asked about, how do we make trust into some kind of a business paradigm? And because of the study which shows it grows by over 1,000%. And to you, Vikram, what he asked, I think Piyush asked, if you confess that you made an error, does it boomerang on you? Which means we go back, the nice guys finish last. So maybe you wait for that one, last again. Ursula, you go first.
Was, again, it was the lady in the back.
Yeah, second chances.
Second chance, by giving second chances. I'm glad to be given second chances because I know there's mistakes I've made. And I think, it all starts with belief. We hadn't talked a lot about belief, and where those beliefs starts from our vision, mission, values, and our common purpose as an organization. I mean, that's the things that's a prerequisite for trust to happen. And we hadn't talked a lot about it, maybe we haven't had time. But without that, knowing what we do and why we do it, when we make mistakes, depending, and then there are certain mistakes that's unrecoverable. When you learn lessons, you go do something else. But I think I'm always looking for, I've dedicated my life to business of giving people second chances. You know, that when people make mistakes, you could invest in them, you could train them, you could develop them, and give them the skills, attitudes, behaviors become better. So I believe with leaders, we should look at opportunities to give people second chances. There's those things, unfortunately, that we cannot afford to give second chances to, particularly when it violates ethics, and it violates things that are so tragic. But if it's something work-related, something that attitudinal, that can change, I believe we give them second chance. If it's something that violates ethics, challenges that, then that may not be a place you can give a second chance to.
Okay.
I can just add to that a bit. You know, it's all about, and especially from a corporate perspective, when a lot of us talk about zero tolerance, I will have zero tolerance. Really, what is the zero tolerance? To me, the zero tolerance is I will not brush anything under the carpet.
Yeah.
You know, I will go to the bottom of it, I will figure out how to fix it. The degree of punitive action sometimes becomes subjective.
Right, exactly.
So, you know, a while you can have a disciplinary grade and you'll have factory-based, you know, if you do it the first time, you get a memo, the second time you get thrown out. I think we have outgrown a lot of that. So there's a lot of subjectivity which can come in, because then you look at family and you look at space and you look at society. Sometimes you can't, and sometimes you can consider this. But I don't think there's any prescriptive thing which we can follow.
And the fact is, if it was all subscribed, you wouldn't need leaders, you just follow the policies.
Absolutely. So that's the difference between really the legal and the governance part.
Pallavi, you want to come in on the value system issue?
I think very valid point there, because you know, I think a lot of the trust issues that come is because there are two people who are not the same. Okay, so for some people breaking the light is okay, for some people breaking the light is not okay. And so you'll find a lot of people, for you, Vicky, Vikram, when you stand, you know, wait at the red light, the guy behind you honking away because he thinks you're wasting your time, and his time because you're actually following the light, right? Because so he's actually angry with you, and he has no trust in you as a driver on the road because you're actually following the traffic lights. It comes from a place of divergent values. And I think today organizations and societies actually know better in terms of being able to draw bigger value through diversity, through understanding each other better. So the lack of trust happens from us versus them kind of a thinking. If we are able to be more inclusive and more broad-minded, I think more tolerant, I think we'll learn to understand each other better, and therefore we'll learn to trust each other. But that's a very, very, when you speak values, you're talking about some very solid, fundamental change, and it might take generations to happen.
Yeah, and let me add to that, since you mentioned diversity. Many societies today are facing a huge internal trust deficit because they are dividing themselves and calling it, as Pallavi rightly mentioned, the other. So there is the othering going on in our society. And these are things that somewhere down the line not just erodes trust, but can sometimes irreparably damage it. You had a question coming, I think, from Mayur in terms of how do you really maybe monetize this whole trust aspect into a healthy culture that results into bottom line in a model form?
I don't have a prompt answer to that, but what I can really say is, you know, it's how you run your businesses that will achieve results, right? So like you said, it's not always the good guy who finishes last or not always the good guy who finishes first. But I think if you run your businesses on sound and solid business principles, and this is something which came down from our founder to us, you will ensure that you get success. You may not be so quick as somebody else would have been. You'll probably sustain a little longer, but I don't think I have a mathematical calculation of how trust is equivalent to the P&L account. But I can certainly tell you with a lot of confidence from what I have seen in my 30+ years in corporate life, that you are very happy about running your business unethically without trust, you don't care about mistrust, or you don't care about trust deficit, there's a high chance that your business won't sustain. So that I'm very confident about. I don't have a mathematical calculation, but you have to see that all of this put together is going to ensure that your business will grow. It'll grow in a sustained manner where people will believe you, customers will believe you, word of mouth referrals will come in, and your business is obviously bound to grow. I don't want to bring it back to the Tata Group, and a lot of other groups who have sustained, maybe 10 and 15 decades of industry and of different onslaughts in corporate life and have still survived. So there must be something right which they have done.
Yeah, Vikram, your question was on what happens if you confess to an error? Does it boomerang on you?
Okay. No, there should be absolutely no fear in owning up to mistakes. The reverse can be catastrophic if you try to brush it under the carpet, and if it's caught out, as it inevitably will be, the retribution will be far worse. The organizational values that you create should create a climate where it becomes easy to actually talk about it. I think the panel has already said you can't always expect that if I made a mistake, there will be absolutely no retribution. I think a very well said point out there was that in case you're going to be talking about ethics or very, very basic value systems that you violated, it might come back to hurt you, but it's better than actually trying to brush it under the carpet. In most cases, organizations will be tolerant. They will give you a second chance.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, what we have done today is to take up a topic which we believe very often gets diminished and devalued because we think, trust is just a word which floats in and floats out. But, end of day, you remember the Jungle Book, everybody? Right. You remember Ka? Trust in me. Just in me. Shut your eyes and trust in me, right? Even Ka the snake is up to a trance, but the word he's using is trust. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this panel has been simply outstanding. I hope you agree with that, right? Give them a big hand. Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you.
And to our wonderful moderator, who this time was asking questions instead of answering them. Right. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, panelists. That was a really insightful discussion. Could we request you to stay on stage just for a little moment, Ursul? We just have some token of appreciation for you.